I'm a fun guy. Obviously, I love the game of basketball. I mean, there's just more questions you have to ask me in order for me to tell you about myself. I just can't give you a whole spiel. I don't even know where you're sitting at.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of the Give and Go podcast. This is your host, Rajan Sharma. I'm here with my co-host, Jordan Taylor. Jordan, what's good?
What's good, Rajan? How you doing?
Hey, man, it's all good. I'm doing almost as good as Robot Kawhi in that clip, man. But I'm just here to announce that we are not alone for this podcast, Jordan. We've got a very special guest today. We have the one and only Adam Johal. Adam, what's good, man?
What's going on, guys? Thanks for having me on the podcast. Nice that I can teach you guys some championship pedigree here.
Oh, yeah, no doubt, man. Adam Johal was he's the winner of our famous Fantasy League basketball last season. And he's here to spit some knowledge, isn't that right?
Yeah, man, I can't give you guys trade secrets, but I can at least discuss what was successful for me in winning my first championship. It was a long grind, had a lot of terrible teams before last year, and we narrowly won the championship, so I'm very happy about that. And Ryan's got a good home here. He had a bit of a rough trip home from Vancouver back to the island, but he's in one piece, so we're going to enjoy the season together.
Now, for those of you that don't know, as part of our continuing collaborations with our new podcast support and our new sponsor, basketballers.ca, we are bringing in more of the basketballers for our podcasts every chance that we get. So you are lucky enough to be with the champion from last year's Fantasy Basketballers League, Adam Johal. And as we said, he's not going to give you any trade secrets today, but man, he's got knowledge for days, and we're going to try and get as much as we can out of him. So, you know what, you're going to hide those trade secrets, but we're going to be Trump's agenda. We're going to find them. We're going to find you.
I'll give you guys little tidbits, but I keep the close stuff, the insider stuff close to the vest. So,
all right, man.
All right.
You'll get the entry level tips about that.
No doubt, man.
Entry level tips. Got it. Rajan, where are we starting with the podcast today? What's on the docket?
All right, man. Well, today we're going to talk about NBA Media Day, that laugh that was heard all around the world. We're going to talk Jimmy Butler, and then we're going to get into some fantasy tips. So, Jordan, let's give and go.
Night. Give and go. Night.
NBA Give and Go.
All right, basketball fans, we are back. It's your co-hosts, Rajan Sharma and Jordan Taylor, here with Adam Johal, and let's get it. Let's talk about the very first topic of the day. Jordan, what do you got for me, man? NBA Media Day.
It's my second favorite part of summer, NBA Media Day. All the teams gather up all their acquisitions, their draft picks, and their poor decisions, and they put them out in front of the cameras for the first time. And boy, did we get some quality, internet memeable quotes, pictures, and sound bites. And I'm going to start with the laugh heard around the world, Toronto Raptors Media Day, who, in my mind, basically made the biggest off-season splash, which we're all aware about with the DeMar DeRozan Kawhi Leonard trade. So, we don't hear a lot from Toronto overall during Media Day. We got this little bit of news that Kyle Lowry dodge calls, dodge information, dodge Masai, dodge new head coach Nick Nurse. But then at the end of the day, it all came down to interviewing Kawhi and seeing what he had to say. Now, Kawhi, though, my God, like, do they not teach these guys? Like, I'm pretty sure I remember in second grade, somebody like, okay, you have to talk about yourself. and you have to write this quick little blurb. But, like, comes in super defensive, as he always is, defensive player of the year, right?
Yeah.
And goes, hey, well, you're going to have to ask more questions later. I'm not ready to talk about that. So, Raj, what you think from the up north media day for Toronto? What the heck's going on over there?
Yeah, there's a lot of news that came out of Toronto. Masai Ujiri telling everybody, telling all the reporters to believe in themselves at one point when they started asking questions about whether or not Kawhi would stay in Toronto. And man, that laugh though, I gotta ask you guys.
It took away everything. Everything after that is basically a moot point. That laugh is media day for Toronto Raptors. You move on. There's nothing else to talk about. It's amazing. Johal, is there anything else here that we need to analyze?
I just think it's hilarious that this guy hasn't said a word in how many months? Like, when was the last time you even heard Kawhi talk? Even when he was with the Spurs, and he finally has a Raptors jersey on. He says all of 2 or 3 sentences and just immediately gets roasted online for that laugh. Like, that part of it is actually pretty funny to me.
Yeah.
It's like, maybe there's a reason why this guy doesn't talk.
Yeah, he tries to show a little bit of personality, and everybody goes and just roasts him forever.
Immediately just gets made fun of. It's just, that part of it was really funny to me. But that laugh was hilarious. But it was great to see Kawhi there. He looked pretty engaged. Seems pretty excited to be with the team.
Yeah, no doubt.
I agree. I definitely see 1 year of solid Kawhi. So the question is, can we overanalyze this interview? And can anyone here tell me if this is going to be 1 year of Kawhi or more Kawhi in Toronto to come?
Man,
of course we can overanalyze.
Yeah.
That's what we're here for. But, I mean, the thing with him, like, you've got to, like, there's so many things that are going to change from now to the end of the season. I mean, just look at how different the rosters are over this last summer. So there's so many factors, I think, that are going to play out this season that, in my opinion, there's probably no reason to look that closely into his body language, how he engages in practice. I mean, he said he wants to take it one day at a time during media day, and I do believe him. Like, I really think that he's going to give Toronto a chance. But at this point, to say, yeah, he's going to sign or he's not, I mean, we did the same thing with Durant. He went to Golden State, which no one predicted during the season, right? So it's almost like one of those things. It's like, why even pay attention to it? Just enjoy it while he's on the team.
Yeah, I think the only thing that this interview confirmed is that Kawhi is, in fact, a robot. A basketball-playing robot. I think that is the only thing that can be absolutely confirmed from this interview.
Error, does not compute, activate laugh sequence.
Oh, man. That was just wild, man. But honestly, I think this is positive news for the Raptors. It took him a while to get him behind a mic, but, man, the one guy I did feel bad about was Danny Green, who's sitting there begging for a question. He was begging.
He's got his own podcast, and no one's talking to him. He's the one who wants to talk, and nobody wants to hear what he has to say.
Well, he was kind of acting as Kawhi's PR man.
Oh, no
redirecting
doubt.
questions and roasting the media with Kawhi, so I thought that was pretty funny.
I think that's going to play a major key in the Raptors trying to keep Kawhi. Guys, one little interesting thing, though, that it was noted, like, Jordan, you mentioned at the top of the clock here that Kyle Lowry was avoiding calls from everybody. And Kawhi Leonard even mentioned that he has not even spoken to Kyle Lowry yet at that point. So, is that cause for concern? Do you think that's concerning that Kyle Lowry is not responding to the Raptors head office? He's not calling Kawhi. Is this a sign that maybe Lowry is going to be maybe causing trouble in that locker room?
I've avoided plenty of calls from my employer.
Oh, yeah. Yo, Joel, this goes on live on the internet. I don't know if you want to admit that.
not my current employer, previous employer.
Of course.
Raj.
Good save.
I'm a good corporate citizen, please.
For Kawhi to not have spoken to Kyle Lowry doesn't surprise me, because I'm pretty sure he hasn't spoken to half the team yet. Probably 80% of the team at this point in the season. However, I think this is a concern because we all know Raptors run on Kyle. DeMar DeRozan, while a star, while the focal point, he can't do as much as he could have, and we all know it, without Kyle Lowry being there. So does this, little bit of friction because of this trade and because of this blind side, does this give it a little bit slower the gate? Do we see Lowry look off Kawhi? Do we see some tension there? Honestly, I think there's going to be a little bit of problem. Lowry talking about, I'm just going to come in, do my job, try and win a championship, and leave at the end of the day. But, I don't know if that's the right attitude to go into a championship-style team in the East, where the top half of the East with LeBron James gone is so competitive this year.
Yeah, I think he's being a little standoffish, and I hope it's not going to cause problems in that locker room because, he's the guy that's supposed to be trying to convince Kawhi to stay. I think once they start playing games, starting winning games, I think that ultimately cures all. I mean, Kyle Lowry's a professional. He knows. Once he gets on the court with Kawhi, sees him blocking shots on one end, taking it all the way, dunking on everybody on the other end, I think he's going to change his tune real quick.
All I got to say is Kyle Lowry had a lot of problems in Houston and Memphis because of attitude. And that attitude somehow magically disappeared in Toronto, and a lot of that is attributed to DeMar DeRozan. So we could see a regression here potentially based on previous experience. Johal, anything to add, my man?
It's always tough to tell. I mean, they could play the first game of the season and they could be clicking on all cylinders and it'll look completely normal and they'll be a great team. Or Jordan, like you said, I mean, Kyle may have issues with his teammates, may have issues with management, and that may show on the court. I tend to think the former. I think they'll be just fine once they get out on the court and sort of get into the season. I imagine for Kyle, this is a lot to process in an off-season. I know it's easy for us on the outside looking in to say that these guys are pros and it's business and this, that, and the other, but he became the player who he was with DeMar DeRozan in Toronto. So I think it's probably tough for him and guys like JV and some of the other guys who have been on the team for a while that have kind of gone through those playoff runs. But really, at the end of the day, I think once they get on the court and they start playing, it's going to become about basketball. And as they sort of build more chemistry throughout the season, I think they'll be fine. I think at this point in Kyle Lowry's career that doing the pouting act, I don't see him doing that. I mean, if this was Houston Kyle Lowry or Memphis Kyle Lowry, that might be a different story. But I think after the season sort of kicks off and the Raptors start to get into gear, that you're going to see Kyle play the way he's played last season. Now, is he going to put up the type of numbers that he's put up the last couple of years? Now, that's certainly up for debate. But I think as far as being a team player and being the guy on the team and being that engine that he's been the last few years, I think they'll be fine. I think this is another thing that I think the media is just taking a little out of proportion around the not contacting the Raptors and all that stuff. I don't really see that as much of a concern at all for the team.
So where do you see the Raptors as far as their potential goes? Do you see this as a 50-win team, a 60-win team? Can they challenge the Celtics?
They could win 60 games. I don't think that's out of the question, but I could also see them win 50. It all rests on Kawhi. If Kawhi comes out and he's the same robot he was in San Antonio, locking guys down, I mean, you're talking about a major upgrade over to DeMar DeRozan. You're talking first team NBA. 2 years ago, he was MVP conversation. He was having one of the best two-way seasons ever in the league. So I think the sky is really the limit, as cheesy as that sounds. But if a guy like Jonas Valanciunas can figure it out, if they can get anything out of Norman Powell, if everything falls in the right place, they could have a really, really big year. But on the flip side, if Kawhi's injuries pop up again, if they have chemistry issues early on, you may see them struggle out of the gate, right? They could get off to a 5-10 start, right? And then everybody will start roasting Nick Nurse, and Nick Nurse will be on the hot seat, and they may not have the season everybody hoped of. But I think, it's a huge range, but anywhere from 50 to 60 games, would not surprise me on the top half of that and the bottom half of that. Sky's the limit for this team. As much as I love DeMar DeRozan, he's probably my favorite Raptor of all time, but you're kidding yourself if you don't think Kawhi Leonard is a major, major upgrade over DeMar DeRozan.
Yeah,
I don't think this is a 60-win team, Johal. I definitely disagree. I do say it is a 50-win team, but I just don't look at that team. I don't look at that team after a year and think that they can increase their win total by, how many games would it have been? Two, one, a couple wins additionally. There's, like you said, there could be a 5-10. That could season. That could be, that middle of the year slump. And I think that's a very legit thing that could happen based on chemistry issues or an injury that could really set them back.
Well, and the other thing, just to build on your point, Jordan, I mean, they have a new coach. Like, I don't know how close it'll be because he obviously was an assistant there for X number of years with Dwayne Casey, but they could take a while to adjust to his system if there's drastic changes, right? I mean, you never know. I mean, but again, on the other side, you look like when the Warriors got Steve Kerr, something just clicked with that team, right? And they were off to the races. Now, obviously, this isn't the same case because they don't have the same level of talent as the Warriors, obviously. But that's a huge, like, it's a huge unknown. Like, that can point the team in either direction very quickly.
Yeah, and
so
I think
it's going to be fun to watch. Like, this is probably the most interested I've been in a Raptors regular season in a long time. Just because it's going to be fun to see how it all shakes out.
Yeah, no doubt, man. And I think, if there's one other player in the entire league that has as much pressure as Kawhi Leonard does right now to carry their team, I think it's going to be LeBron James. Switching over to the LA Lakers media day, LeBron James was there with his new teammates, his new squad, the young Lakers, with a few old vets mixed into there.
The meme team.
Yeah,
the meme team.
Yeah, that's right, man. So we actually had an interesting quote here from one of his new teammates, Michael Beasley. Let me roll the clip here.
With taking a day at a time, where should this Lakers team end up by the end of the year?
Exactly where we want to.
Which is?
Where we want to be.
Where do you want to be?
Taking it a day at a time.
But if once you add up all those days, where can you end up?
The future.
What? Fair. You're going to move the calendar there, but the future, let's say April through June, April through May, where should the ceiling be for this group?
The ceiling, I don't know. I'm not sure. That's not up for me. I'm not an analysis. I'm not a stat chaser or critic.
Yep.
So like I said, we're here to do one job, which is work, sacrifice, and take it a day at a time.
Jordan, Michael Beasley is not a critic. He's not an analyst. But is he high? Jordan, is this a failed test? Is this a failed test for Michael Beasley?
Stat analyzer. Michael Beasley is not. The boy is get buckets, not get stats. Man, I love this because all this is telling me right now is Michael Beasley is the best basketball player in the world on this team. And he's looking around this roster, he's like, fuck, man, I don't even know if we're going to make the playoffs. Like, I can't even tell you shit. Like, it's just so crazy in La La Land right now. The fact that they got this whole new roster with LeBron in the spotlight. I don't think he wants to say anything because he's afraid LeBron's going to yell at him the next day. It's very pressure-oriented in LA right now. Results matter.
Yeah, no doubt. Joel, what do you think, man? Is this a failed test by Michael Beasley?
You know what? If you were expecting anything else from Michael Beasley, you signed the wrong guy. The Lakers knew exactly what they were getting themselves into. This team's going to be awesome to watch on and off the court. And then the fact that these guys are all in LA together, like they're not in some small, Cleveland or some, little tiny town with nobody in it. They're in LA. Like, these guys are going to be hilarious to watch this season between him, Rondo, JaVale, Lonzo, LeVar. Like, it is going to be hilarious. And I think LeBron is going to soak it all up. Like, I think he's going to love all the attention that the Lakers are going to get in that town.
Oh, yeah. This is going to be the most, they're going to get so much media coverage on that team. There are going to be so many quotes coming out of LA from Lance, from Rondo, who was just named the starter.
Didn't he?
Yeah.
Talk about Lance. That's just insane. Like, this team is going to have the most sound bites of any team maybe ever in the NBA. And they're going to be on Shaqtin' a Fool a lot.
Oh, yeah.
A lot.
They've got former multiple Shaqtin' a Fool MVPs on their roster right now.
I think he's got to be a Shaqtin' Hall of Famer by now.
Yeah, no doubt, man. Jordan, you got any more NBA Media Day news for me?
Man, just to finish off with the Lakers, Adam briefly touched on Lonzo Ball and how there's a lot of hype about Lonzo Ball been working on his shot over the summer. And a couple of those clips came out during Media Day, him warming up. Obviously he's not ready for training camp. He's not participating in 5-on-5 yet. Still working on recovering from his knee surgery. And I still tell you, That shot is ugly as hell. That is a ugly ass shot. There is nothing that's changed. Instead of crossing from his left shoulder over to his right, he shoots center now, but the hitch is still there. He's still shooting sideways. I don't think it's going to be a big deal. Moving forward with Media Day, my last soundbite from my sound off for Media Day was out in the Bronx with our boy Enes Kanter and his always soundable sound bites with his take on New York Knicks making the playoffs, which is a laugh in itself. Let's be honest. No Kristaps Porzingis, no unicorn. There's going to be a lot of problems. And the quote I'm pretty sure I heard coming out of New York was that the thinking about the playoffs and the Knicks being in the playoffs makes my nipples hard. Enes Kanter.
When I think about playoffs, my nipples get hurt.
Raj.
What?
Why is this guy just so tantalizing annoying? Just saying stuff like this on a daily basis is just not necessary.
Has marijuana been legalized yet in New York? That's my only explanation for this shit, man. Enes Kanter, he's out in New York.
Cannot confirm.
He's wilding, man. He just knows that this season is already a wash. He's got that starting center spot on lock. And you know what? Whatever it takes to get him excited and ready for the season, man. If he wants to get his nipples hard thinking about the playoffs, right now is the closest that they are going to be to the playoffs all season long. That I can guarantee.
He seems like a really weird dude.
What? Very weird dude.
What is it with those New York centers?
Hoop, right? Double machine. Call it what it is.
Yeah, no doubt, man.
Yeah. He's gonna have a big year with the Knicks, I bet.
I think he's the only option, man. He's the only option up there. Jeez, I think they released.
How about you, Raj? Any other sound bites from Media Day that I haven't brought up, that we haven't brought up, that we need to let the people know?
Not really sound bites from Media Day, but I do have an update on the infamous Minnesota Timberwolves. Jordan, it doesn't look like this reunion is going to happen. Over the last week, we've heard multiple reports about Jimmy Butler requesting a trade from the Timberwolves, thus crushing the dream of Tom Thibodeau forming his infamous Timberwolves team and reuniting him with Luol Deng and Joakim Noah and Derrick Rose and Taj Gibson with the Timberwolves. Instead, Jimmy Butler has named 3 teams as his preferred choice. Originally, when the reports came out, which was the New York Knicks to play with Enes Kanter, the Brooklyn Nets, and the LA Clippers. And now a 4th team has emerged, which is now his preferred destination, which is the Miami Heat. The Timberwolves, of course, do not give 2 Fs about where he wants to play, and have basically said that they're going to trade him for the best offer. So I want to hear your guys' take, man. Where do you think Jimmy Butler ends? I'm going to start with you, Adam.
Well, if I was him, I would playing for Miami. He gets to play with a good coach, pretty proven team, some guys who've been to the playoffs before. And honestly, as far as trade pieces go, it sounds like Miami, if they can sort of generate some salary cap room, they might be the ones who can actually make this trade happen and give Minnesota the best return. But I like the fit. I mean, it'd be great to see Jimmy on the Heat. I'd actually rather see him on the T-Wolves, because when he was healthy last year, that was a really fun team to watch, a really good team. But obviously that's not going to happen due to some interpersonal issues, it looks like, on the team. But, I think the Heat would be a good fit for him. It'd be cool to see him play in New York for the Clippers, but I don't know if the Clippers will give up what Minnesota's going to ask them for. But Miami, sure, seems like a good fit, right? I mean, depending on who they can get back.
What do you think, Jordan?
We need to understand that Jimmy Butler was traded for Lowry Markkanen, Chris Dunn, and Zach LaVine. 3 guys that averaged 16, 12, and 20 points a game respectively. Obviously, that 20 points a game is with an asterisk coming off an ACL injury on a short season. that was a lot of talent to give up. I don't think they realized how much they gave up at that time. So what they're asking for to try and get back, they're not going to get their return back on this. Absolutely. Adam, I agree with you that the return from Miami is the most sexy. It's the most tantalizing. But at the same time, are they able to put a package together that would rival what they gave away to Chicago? No, I don't think so.
They're never going to get. Yeah, they're not going to get that back. They had to know that going in, but I don't think anybody at the time realized that Lowry marketing was going to be that good. There's a lot of people really nailing the Bulls for making that pick when they did. They ended up being right, obviously, in taking Lowry marketing, but unfortunately, that's what happens, right? I mean, when you're trading unknown talent or draft picks like that, they could hit or they could miss. And unfortunately, the Timberwolves got really unlucky. And Chris Dunn had a pretty good year last year as well. So they could be left with the short end of the stick for sure on that trade they made.
Yeah. So let's talk about this a little bit. Jimmy Butler being one of these guys who wants to leave Minnesota because he is upset with the current status of the team and the maturity of the team. And the fact that, I look around at those other teams that he wanted to get traded to, Miami, Brooklyn, LA Clippers, I don't see a lot of, maturity level in terms of guys trying to make the playoffs. Yeah, there's some older guys there, but I really don't think this is a maturity thing. I think this is Jimmy Butler trying to get max money. Raj, what you think?
Yeah, I think all the teams that he's kind of proposed to and wanting to go play with, they all have cap space for next season to sign a second max free agent. Now, the Miami deal kind of intrigues me, obviously, because they seem to be the only ones willing to give up actual, good parts to make Minnesota still be competitive. I've heard a dark horse team in this whole thing is the Houston Rockets, and they're trying to work out a deal around Eric Gordon, but they just don't have some of the assets that Miami does. I think it'd be interesting for Jimmy Butler to go be reunited with Dwayne Wade and Gabrielle Union out in Miami. I know Jimmy got in a little trouble a couple weeks ago commenting on Gabrielle Union's photos, so I don't know how much D Wade will enjoy having Jimmy in that city. But hey, man, I think
that photo got everyone in trouble. That was not just Jimmy Butler. Anyone who saw that photo got in trouble. Absolutely.
Oh.
And, Jimmy Butler and Dwayne Wade worked so well in Chicago for their half a season. I mean, darn, that sounds like a good deal there, too. I think this is an ulterior motive for money. Adam, I agree with you. It's a shame to lose out of Minnesota. Before we went down with that knee injury, that team was coming in, and that team was coming in hot.
Absolutely. They were on track to finish top 3 or 4, right, when he was healthy. So we'll see. It's going to be interesting. I mean, but Raj, like you said, there could be some dark horse team that we don't even know about that'll swoop in with an offer to grab Jimmy. But I mean, I can totally see Jimmy wanting to go somewhere where somebody can sign in the max slot. But as we've seen with Paul George and maybe even Kawhi this summer, sometimes people don't sign into that max slot. You don't find that max player. So, if I'm Jimmy Butler, I got to see what the best team fit is, not just the place where I can get a player to play next to me.
Yeah. The only thing that kind of surprised me about this whole thing is that a lot of the teams that he listed off as his destinations are not really winning teams. They're not teams with a championship.
No, exactly.
I used to think Jimmy Butler valued winning over everything, and that just doesn't seem to be the case anymore. And, there's rumblings of him wanting to play with Kyrie. Maybe a reunion in New York could happen. But, that's to be seen for now. But, hey, man, all we know is a deal is pending and should probably happen before the start of the season. So maybe we'll touch on that by the time we post our next pod. There might already be a deal in place.
For sure.
Now, Raj, before we move on from this one, I want to bring up the fact that both Phoenix and Sacramento are trying to get in on this deal on a 3-way team. Phoenix, obviously, very apparent their motives, trying to pick up a point guard so that they can play basketball next year, whereas Sacramento's just trying to get some of those sweet picks. You touched on Houston trying to get in there. Reports coming out of the Waj bombs that we all know and love essentially saying that this is a impossible task, but could happen with a third team. So do we see this being a 3-team trade, you guys, or is this going to be a straight swap, player for players?
I think there has to be multiple teams involved here. Doesn't seem to be one team. Maybe the Heat could put together a deal by themselves, but it sounds like either way, like the Heat don't really have the draft picks to deal in a trade, so they might have to look to move Goran Dragic somewhere and pick up somebody else out of this deal. So I definitely think there'll be multiple teams involved. I think eventually he does end up in Miami. That's just my prediction. I don't think they're going to make a whole lot of noise with him, but I don't know. I guess we'll. This is more about him settling into his role for the future as opposed to just this upcoming season.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, let's go on to the very last topic of today's podcast here. We brought Adam in here for a reason, man. So let's talk some fantasy hoops. Adam, we have probably one of the most competitive leagues in the entire world, if I do say so myself. We've got an annual general meeting that we do every year for our league, where we talk ball for hours and hours. We go shoot some hoops ourselves, and then we go and have a good time, man. So this past year, you were the winner, and you were awarded the White Mamba Brian Scalabrine Trophy for fantasy basketball.
Most outstanding fantasy basketball player trophy awarded to Adam Johal last year.
Yeah.
So Adam, we've got the draft coming up for a lot of people on the internet right now. All the kids trying to pick it out. I want you to help us out, and this is why you're here, because we brought the big boys in for you kids.
Yeah, that's right, man. So we just recently had our draft, and we've done this preseason. So we're just going to go through here with the very first round of our draft. Adam, you picked 3rd overall. I had the 6th overall pick, and Jordan, you picked 8th. So, Adam, I just wanted you to go through your thought process here. I think it's been pretty general in every mock draft I've done. We've seen James Harden and Anthony Davis go 1 and 2, which was the case here. You're on the clock at number 3 with those 2 players off the board. Who'd you take and why?
So when I was doing mocks, I was fully expecting that both of those guys wouldn't be available. We did have some false insider information saying that a certain superstar from LA might be going 1st overall, so that was really shifting my draft strategy. But when I'm looking at picking 3, I honestly hate picking 3, especially in a draft like this when the first top 2 players are so head and shoulders above the rest. But when I was looking at pick 3, I really had to pick based on who I thought was going to be available in the 2nd round, rather than looking at who the best player available was in the 1st round, because really once you get past 1 and 2, it's really just pick a name out of a hat. All these guys are pretty solid between LeBron, Jokic, Kat, Durant, Curry. Really, it was take your pick. So when I was looking at the top talent that was going to be available to me at the end of the 2nd round, a lot of rebounders, a lot of guys who perform well in punt free throw builds. And when I was looking at the top player for punting free throws, so players who are not strong shooting free throws but strong across the board everywhere else, really came down to Kat and LeBron, and I had to give it to LeBron because LeBron's assists are elite, and it is hard to find elite assists, especially at a position that's not point guard. So that made my decision, honestly, pretty easy. I wanted to go with LeBron. He's a good player to build around, puts up categories pretty much across the board, and paired really nicely with the 2nd round pick, which was Drew Holiday. So I slightly felt like I might have been taking him too early, but I think he's going to have a really big year in LA. I think he could have one for the ages this year.
Yeah, no doubt, man. LeBron seems to fall in a lot of drafts, but I think he's always a safe choice. So
yeah, sometimes you got to go safe. I've rolled the dice before, and I've been burned, so I wanted to play it safe this time.
Yo, that's fair. So I picked at 6. So once LeBron was off the board at 3, I was hoping he'd be available at 6. But then we dropped down. Nikola Jokic went 4th, which I was a little surprised about. We'll get to that a little bit later. Karl Anthony Towns from Minnesota went 5th overall. So I'm sitting on the clock at number 6. So for me, I know assists are highly valued in fantasy sports because it's probably one of the more difficult stats to get. And there's a lot of players that do it, but finding elite assist guys is tough. But I just felt that I wanted somebody that could also provide me with defensive stats as well. So at number 6, I chose Kevin Durant. A little known fact about Durant, he probably should have won the Defensive Player of the Year award last year, or been close to it at least. He averaged almost 2 blocks a game. He got me a couple steals a game. He's hitting threes, rebounds. He's getting 7 a game, 5 assists a game, and elite scoring. Probably one of the greatest scorers in the entire league. It came down to basically either Durant, and I thought about Giannis because he's a very similar player. And in most mock drafts, Giannis has been going top 3 or 4, but that wasn't the case with us. He kind of slid a little bit. I took a guy that will also get me 3-point shooting, and just basically he's an 8-category superstar. Like, he'll get you everything. Yeah. So
that's the thing when you're talking and we should also preface this. I don't know, you guys have probably mentioned this before, but we are playing an 8-category ESPN head-to-head league. So when you're looking at 8-category, I mean, Giannis isn't going to get you any free throws. He's not going to get you any threes. So knocking those 2 categories off the board really handcuffs you when you're picking in the second round, especially, right? So I think that's what scared a lot of people away from Giannis and why we saw him slip, which we'll obviously get into later. But I think Kevin Durant's a great pick. I was honestly thinking about him at number 3. So
yeah, I was a little surprised to
see him on the board. Yeah,
a little surprised to see him on the board there.
6th. No. I mean, when you're picking 6th, you kind of takes a lot of the thinking out of it, and you can just grab the best player available. And a lot of times, it ends up being one of the top guys in the entire draft, right? So
yeah, and you can't go wrong.
Yeah, you can. And I mean, you can talk about injuries or whatever, but I mean, in today's NBA, anybody can get injured at any time. Not just today's NBA, obviously, but there's no point in trying to play too much attention into injuries these days. So I love the Kevin Durant pick.
Yeah, no, thanks, man. And so, Jordan, you're sitting at 8th. So the 7th pick was Damian Lillard from the Portland Trail Blazers. So sitting at 8th, you had a choice between a few different players. Jordan, what was your thought process here?
Well, first off, let's begin with saying that, you know, at basketballers, especially in NBA fantasy, we only play life on hard mode. So picking in a preseason definitely adds to this. I don't agree with you guys in terms of your comment about you can't look too far into injuries. You know, this is very apparent that this whole league is very scared of any injury-prone players. You know, obviously, sitting at 8th, if you've been paying attention, I had the opportunity to choose between stalwarts, fantasy basketball pillars, like Stephen Curry, Giannis, and Russell Westbrook at the 8th overall pick. Now, in my mind, these guys are top 5 potential for fantasy basketball every year.
No doubt.
So the fact that I had this available says a lot. Adam, Raj, I agree with you in the sense that in an 8-cat basketball fantasy league setup, Giannis is not as dominant as he would be in, say, like a roto league or a points only or a auction style draft, or even something where, you know, you add turnovers to it, right? Like, that gives him a little bit more advantage. Whereas in our league, we don't count turnovers. We only count the pure positive stats.
Yeah.
And that obviously gives you a lot of different credit. So as a fantasy basketball, you know, general manager, you need to look at positions that excel in an 8-category league. The double-headed Cerebrus here is 3 points and 3 points made and points. Because if you hit a 3-pointer, you get a stat, and you also get 3 points. So that's another stat that you're adding up. So to me, it was pretty easy at that point. The best 3-point shooter available, who is a top 5 type of player, is Stephen Curry. And I went ahead with Stephen Curry with 4 3-pointers made per game. That's definitely, you know, how this league is built. And the point guard position, while always very dominant, isn't as top-heavy as it used to be. So after a certain point guards do drop off, and that's a position that you need to make sure that you have good stats coming out of those areas. You know, obviously you're talking about guys like LeBron James and like Kevin Durant, guys who get blocks, guys who get assists outside that point guard position, because that's so rare and so important. I mean, Russell Westbrook was my other option. Once again, a point guard, triple-double machine. But, as we're all talking about, just had a knee injury. Minor tweak. Not too many people are too scared about it. But at the same time, that's time away from the team. And they've got Dennis Schroeder, who is a more than capable backup. There's some concerns there. Steph Curry had a bad year last year, also had a tweak. But that center, JaVale McGee, is now gone. I don't blame it on him. That was an accident. It happens in basketball all the time. And honestly, I just think that he's the better player out of those three for this type of league. Raj, what you think?
Yeah, man. So I think it was a good pick there, for sure. I was honestly very surprised that you had a choice between Curry, Giannis, and Russell Westbrook in your at 8.
Right? It's crazy.
Yeah.
That's how kind of like Adam said, after the top 2 picks, you might as well pick a name out of a hat from 2 to 3 to 10 based on the dude's preference,
Yeah, because closing out the first round, Giannis Antetokounmpo fell to 9, which in the 20 mock drafts, 30 mock drafts that I had done, he did not fall past 5 even once. So just to see that he fell to 9, I have a lot of faith in our league, and I like to think we're smarter than your average basketball fan. But hey, man, that's a great pickup for Drayden Power, who we had on the pod last week, for the 9th overall pick, grabbing Giannis. We had Russell Westbrook picked 10th overall. So again, it's a risky play because of his injuries. But at the end of the first round, man, sometimes you just take those risks. You roll the dice. Joel Embiid went the 11th pick. And then Kawhi Leonard rounded out the top 12. So, very interesting draft. Guys, I just want to hear, was there any big surprises in this top 9? I listed mine as Giannis. Anybody else you kind of surprised you in this top 12?
I mean, maybe not so much in the top 12. I mean, I'll say it for a third time. I mean, after 1 and 2, the order can be completely different depending on the draft, right? Depending on what each guy's strategy is. I think the bigger thing that surprised me was in the second round, we saw DeMar DeRozan go 15th, third pick of round 2. That cut me a little off guard. I was a little surprised by that, but as far as the first round goes, nothing really that surprising, to be honest with you. I mean, Damian Lillard at 7 over Steph Curry, that was a bit surprising, but he could have a big year as well. So, yeah,
Okay.
I'm honestly not shocked. I'm not even that shocked that Giannis slipped to 9, to be honest with you. I've heard some mocks and some fantasy professionals who have been picking him sort of 7, 8, 9. So that doesn't surprise me probably as much as you guys.
Okay. How about you, Jordan?
I think my biggest surprise out of the group is seeing how high Nikola Jokic went in our league this year.
Yeah, I agree with that.
He went number 4. That's a very huge climb. Not to discredit that guy, very talented player, like you guys have talked about. Assists, rebounds, and points. And I think he can shoot threes a little bit too.
Yeah,
he can do a lot of different categories. He's kind of reminding me of kind of like how Nicholas Batum, when he used to play in Portland, like, say 10 years ago, I think was it. And he was considered a top 12 fantasy player because he gave you a bunch of stats. He gave you everything in an 8-cat league. He didn't do anything extremely well. He just did everything fairly well. So the fact that he did go that high for me, it's a strategy thing. Obviously, the guy who picked him at 4, he's trying to build a team, and he's building a team probably not around points, probably around all these other stats. And the fact that he can get you 5 stats in a good line on a good night fairly frequently, pretty non-injury prone as far as I've seen. I mean, it's a little surprising, but it definitely wasn't a shock. I still think he's a little bit high, considering what other guys were on the board. Again, you touched on Damian Lillard and being before Stephen Curry. He's more of a volume scorer. And, Portland's going to be in the thick of things, whereas Stephen Curry's going to be floating for a while. So, there could be some games where I miss Steph Curry due to rest, right? And then, of course, Russell Westbrook falling down as far as 10. But that's literally only because people are scared of injuries in our league.
Yeah, for sure, man. I think the Jokic thing kind of surprised me too, considering Karl Anthony Towns and Kevin Durant were still on the board. I definitely thought they were going to be the 2 picks there. I was thankful that Kevin Durant dropped to me at 6. Hey, man, it should be a fun season. I'm looking forward to it. But as far as the podcast goes, that's all the time we have today. Adam, I just want to thank you again for coming on here, man. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks for having me, guys. That was fun.
Yeah, no doubt. Jordan, take us away, man.
All right. Now listen, kids. Fantasy basketball is super addicting, so make sure that you play responsibly and you don't inhale when you're doing drafts. This has been another episode of the Give and Go podcast with your hosts, Rajan Sharma, Jordan Taylor. Super happy to have our guest host from our newest sponsor, basketballers.ca, Adam Johal, fantasy basketball champion, providing some light. We've given you the information. Now go do something with it. Don't forget, we're on all forms of social media. Facebook at Give, the letter N, Go Podcast. Twitter, SoundCloud at the same name. You can find us at Google Play Store or iTunes or wherever your favorite podcast is found. Double time. We've given you the information. Now go do something with it. Give and go.
And we out.